Welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, where we bring you conversations with the top business minds on Long Island and around the nation every week. Featuring expert consultants and small business owners who have found success but are also willing to share their top tips, failures, and give gritty, matter-of-fact advice based on their firsthand experience. Now, let's get down to business on Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello and welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the Nassau Community College Foundation. My name is Ray Schwetz, AVP of Business Banking at Jovia Financial Credit Union, along with Denisha Boston Hill, CEO, keeper of the brand Market and Digital Agency. Today, I'm flying solo, and we have a very special treat for you. We're focusing on a business that involves high stakes, personalities clashing, creatives waging battle against executives, and careers on the line. Have I mentioned survival or war rigs or gasoline or death-defying auto stunt mayhem? Such is the business of creating a movie masterpiece. Oh, what a lovely day. Join the conversation now with Kyle Buchanan, author of Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, The Making of Mad Max Fury Road. Welcome to the show, Kyle. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you about Blood, Sweat, and Chrome.
I'm so excited.
Kyle Buchanan is a pop culture reporter and serves as a projectionist, the awards season columnist for the New York Times. He has been named Journalist of the Year by the National Arts and Entertainment Journalism Awards and previously served as a senior editor at Vulture, New York's magazine entertainment website, where he's covered the movie industry. A native of Southern California, he lives in Los Angeles. Mad Max Fury Road is one of the most storied movies in history. It won 6 Oscars and has been hailed as one of the greatest action films ever. But it's a miracle that Mad Max ever made it to the screen or that anybody survived the production. Now, with Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, author and pop culture reporter Kyle Buchanan gets a first-person account behind the scenes to piece together how this movie was made despite all of its roadblocks and how it finally made it into theaters. The title is perfect. How did you come up with the title?
We always say blood, sweat, and tears when something takes a whole lot of hard work. And I think given the vehicular mayhem of this movie, Blood, Sweat, and Chrome felt like the sort of the right leap to take. I mean, it took a lot of those blood, sweat, and tears to get this film made, over 20 years to make Fury Road. To have the willpower to see it through, I thought was a pretty incredible thing. Yeah,
I would agree. And for you, I mean, well, first of all, I just want to tell you that I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge Mad Max fan.
Thank you.
Fury Road is on my top 10 for sure. And I think that your book is the best written on the making of a film since Future Noir by Paul Salmon. Just outstanding. And I wanted to know, how did you take this? You had 130 interviews. How did you make that into a coherent telling of the making of this mayhem-filled film?
Well, first of all, that's very kind of you to say. I mean, it wasn't easy. I wanted the book to feel, as mammoth in some ways as the movie, and as intimate in some ways as the movie can sometimes be. So I just called up just about everybody I could. I took a look at that closing credits scroll, and I tracked down as many people as possible, not just, the obvious people like the stars, Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, but, set PAs or costumers or camera people, the sort of people who don't usually get interviewed but have stories as great and indelible as anybody that you would normally hear from. And then once they all told their stories, the spine of the thing suggested itself. But it really was the best possible scenario for a writer, because if anything, I had too many incredible stories. There's not a single person who worked on this film who had a boring time. It was either the most exciting creative endeavor of their careers or one of the most traumatic.
I think it's fantastic. The principals, of course, I mean, yes, we want to hear from them. The story of, and forgive me if I mispronounce his name, but the story of Shyam Yadav Toast was one of my favorite passages in the book.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about him and his story?
Yeah, so, when you're putting together a book, you think to yourself, well, let me tell the story of the first day of shooting, because that's always a very interesting, fraught time on a movie. Everyone's still getting to know each other. It's the first, first real moment of putting the pedal to the road. And you would normally, I think, expect that first day story to be told by one of the key players like George Miller, who directed it, or Tom Marshall-Lees. But it turned out to me that the very best first day story came from this guy, Toast Yadav. He was a data wrangler, obsessed with Mad Max. It's the reason why he went into Hollywood. He always hoped they would make another movie. And then, of course, as soon as there was one, he moved heaven and earth to try to get to work on it. And he's a really lovely guy. I think immediately when George met him, even though this isn't a major figure that he's going to be spending much time with, he was really struck by this guy's passion and this guy's pure heart. And he also had this fun thing called the French Toast Club, where he would just make French toast and hand it out as a gift to people on the street free of charge. So on the very last day, or the very last hour of shooting on that first day, after this, incredible 12 hours of getting to watch his dreams come to life, getting to watch Mad Max in person, Toast gets the best gift yet, which is George Miller coming up to him and saying that kind of in honor of Toast's great spirit, they were going to name Zoe Kravitz's character in the film Toast. So that's the sort of first day that just truly can't be beat. He kept a fantastic diary of how he felt when that happened. And I knew as soon as I heard it, that's the sort of story I want to tell, not just because it's great, but because it really reminds you that there are so many different people who work on a movie and their contributions are sometimes less seen, but just as important.
You have a great quote in the book from Corey Watson. Reading about action is like dancing about architecture. He was referring to the script detailing action on screen, and how boring that might be. I can imagine that was a consideration for you because you're writing about one of the best action films ever made. What were some of the challenges that you faced? What was the biggest challenge that you faced?
Yeah, what Corey is describing is the really unique approach that George Miller and his colleagues went about making his movie with, which is they didn't actually write a real script. They put the whole thing out through storyboards. You would have to fly to Sydney, go to his conference room where all the storyboards, every shot of the movie was laid out end to end, and he would walk you through it. A really unconventional, unprecedented way to script a movie. So, of course, the challenge falls to me then after that. If they couldn't even write about these things, well, then how am I going to do it? It's an exciting thing. I think that if you watch Fury Road and you're not stirred by it and you're not kind of losing your mind and curious and provoked by it, then you're just not watching it right. For me as a writer, it would sound like a challenge, but actually it was a blessing. I never got tired of writing about Fury Road or trying to come up with fun ways to write about it. Even if I hadn't interviewed all these people who had great stories to tell about the making of it, just the movie itself is a great story.
Everything about the culmination of Fury Road is unconventional. The non-existence of the script, the storyboards, the sequential filming of scenes, the workshops with the War Boys, all great stories. In writing Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, what aspects of making this film really surprised you?
Honestly, just the willpower to get it over the line. If you had this idea in your head and for 20 years people were saying, no, you can't do it, or shutting you down every time you attempted to do it, or real act of God things happened where it felt like fate itself was telling you that it can't be done, you'd probably abandon ship. If it took 20 years to schedule this interview, I would have given up long ago, and that's just an interview. So for George Miller to be toting this idea around in his head for that long and just never, ever letting that flame die, I found that really inspiring. And I hope that readers do too, that, obviously that's very inspiring if you're a budding artist and, you're afraid of rejection or failure. But honestly, it's inspiring for anybody. Sometimes we know that we can do something. We know that it can be great. And it's not always easy to convince other people, especially when what we're trying to do hasn't been done or is a little bit outside the lines. So, just listening to George tell these stories and knowing what a masterpiece it became against all odds, to me, that's my biggest takeaway. And that's something I hope to sort of use to drive myself in my own life.
And that does come across in the book. It is very inspiring. You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of National Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Murray Schwetz, and our guest today is Kyle Buchanan, author of Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, The Making of Mad Max Fury Road. Much has been said about the on-location clashes between Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy. What's your view on what happened there?
You know, they're two very different people. Their ways of working are very different. Charlize is very by the book, very professional. She will show up on time. She will hit her mark. If you tell Charlize, we need one tear to come from the corner of your left eye, that tear will come, and she'll do it every take if you need it. Tom Hardy is not that way. Tom Hardy is not going to show up on time. He's going to show up when he wants to show up, and he's not going to ever do the material the same way twice. He's always going to be experimenting. Sometimes even to hear him tell it, he will fall flat on his face. He'll embarrass himself if he feels like by doing it wrong, it gets him closer to what is right. So these are two very diametrically opposed approaches to acting. They're both tremendous actors, but the way they get there is different. So there was already going to be that tension. You add to that just the tension of shooting this in the desert, not some studio in LA where they green screened everything. They were doing all this for real, really on those cars that were really moving, doing real stunts in the middle of nowhere, where everywhere you looked, it was just the fantasy world of the movie, nothing else, nothing tying you to your reality. So the conflict and the world of those characters bled into everybody's real lives. And then, lastly, the fact that they didn't know if they were making the biggest bomb of their careers or the biggest masterpiece. That's a lot of anxiety because you know your faces are going to be on that poster. So there was just a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of worry that they were carrying around. And to hear them tell it, they sometimes, or often, took it out on each other.
Now, Kyle, before meeting George Miller, what was your impression of him, and how did it change as you gradually got to know him through the making of this book?
Well, I think that if I asked you to just imagine who's the guy who created Mad Max, who's the guy who would direct something like Mad Max Fury Road, you would never on your own come up with this actual person. He's the kindliest, most grandfatherly man, you know, very unprepossessing, this mild Australian lilt of a voice. Just a sweetheart. He seems just like a nice professor, and yet he has these crazy visions emerge from his mind. It's funny. He has one of the most unique Hollywood careers because before Fury Road, he made two Happy Feet movies. He did, you know, Babe. He has the most eclectic resume, and I honestly think those movies are maybe closer to what you'd imagine from this guy than Mad Max. Maybe that's part of the reason he never has an easy time making these movies because people underestimate him. They take a look at him and they're like, well, I'm not sure you can get this over the line. You don't seem like the kind of madman that this film kind of needs. But what he does have is that spine of steel. Anytime, you know, executives try to run roughshod on him or actors don't get it, he does not waver. He knows what he has and he won't stop until it's committed to film.
It's crazy to think that he's 70 years old, and he directed a film that's the fourth entry in an action franchise where the other three are considered milestones with a different lead actor, and yet this fourth film was arguably the best of the four.
And I've talked to directors half his age who said, oh, it would have killed me to direct this. So it's doubly astonishing.
It is. What was George Miller's reaction to the book? Did you get a reaction from him yet?
He was incredibly cooperative. You know, he authorized a lot of people to talk on the record who've never talked about their involvement with this book. I think near the end, I could sense a little bit of trepidation, maybe. You know, he is such a control freak. Maybe that's, you know, like a kind of slangy way to put it, but it's not incorrect. He is somebody with an incredible eye for exacting detail. That's why his movies are bursting with it. So for him to have that sort of control over his movie, but not much control at all about how this book would be written, what would be in it, or how it would be received, I think that gave him a little bit of hesitation. But it's to his credit, and it's honestly to everybody's credit, including Charlize and Tom, to talk to me because, you know, Charlize definitely knew if she came clean about what really happened with her and Tom Hardy, it would set off a whole new round of headlines, which has done. And it's not her favorite thing to talk about, but she's a very real person for being a celebrity. She wants to be asked tough questions. She wants to be able to talk about tough things. And she never shied away from talking about these things that might have been, something that another actor would prefer to kind of skirt or talk around.
Kyle, you touch on the upcoming prequel slated currently for 2024. Do you have any tidbits on the upcoming prequel that you can share?
I'm looking forward to it. It's called Furiosa. It's about the young Furiosa. She's played by Charlize in the film, but in the prequel, since it's a much younger version, she'll be played by Anya Taylor-Joy from The Queen's Gambit. It's not easy to fill Charlize's shoes. That's such an iconic role already. Mm-hmm. But that, Anya is a very talented actress. I think if anyone could do it, it would be her. What's interesting here is, sometimes the movie succeeds and then they're like, okay, now what? That's not the case with Furiosa. They've had this screenplay written, years before Fury Road even was shot.
Right.
The George Miller and his writers did such a deep dive into this character when they were trying to figure out her backstory that they thought, wow, there's a whole compelling story here, and a screenplay even. So I'm excited because the people that I've spoken to who worked on Fury Road, they all read that Furiosa screenplay, and some of them were like, it's even more compelling than Fury Road. That was the one I think that they should have shot first.
Understanding our focus is on Fury Road, of course. There was a mention, and I'd love to hear more, about what happened with George Miller's vision for the Justice League. Can you share anything that you might not have made it in the book?
Yeah. At one point when Fury Road wasn't happening, he was trying to get Justice League off the table. And as tends to happen with big George Miller action movies, it was not easy to make, and that one really did fall through. It would have been interesting, though. Armie Hammer was cast as Batman, Adam Brody as the Flash. He had a very unique take on the material. I think a little bit different than, again, the sort of more corporate-friendly, let's just spread everybody out over a bunch of movies and try to ape what Marvel's doing vibe that we see sometimes. George Miller he's not some director who emerged from the Sundance Film Festival and got swallowed by the comic book machine. He is a very particular filmmaker with his own very particular way of shooting action and writing it. And I think he would have tried to push those characters to their limits, and it would have felt extremely comic booky and visceral and exciting.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen it. And who knows what lies in the future.
I was going to say, who could have even foreseen that after all the trouble they had making Fury Road, that they'd be making Furiosa? I think if you told Warner Brothers as they were battling with George Miller, this is going to be a massive success and you're going to make a prequel to it, they never would have believed you.
You are listening to Tara Talk Business Radio. Our guest today is Kyle Buchanan, author of Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, The Making of Mad Max Fury Road. My name is Ray Schwetz on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Now, for benefit of someone who's not read the book yet, what's the wildest story, or one of the wildest stories, there are many, from The Making of Fury Road that you covered?
Well, the Tom and Charlize fight, that's a specific thing. They've talked in the past around the fact that they had tension. But in this book, we, for the first time, tell the story of the day that they had their biggest fight, which is, a day where Charlize showed up to set, full, makeup, costume, sat in her car, in the car of the movie, the War Rig, at 8 a.m. Tom Hardy was supposed to show up at 8 a.m., didn't. 9 a.m., still no Tom. 10 a.m., still no Tom. They're telling Charlize she can get out of the truck, she can go back to her trailer, she can have some water or food. She says, no, I'm making a point. I'm waiting here until my co-star shows up. And if he doesn't show up, something had better be done. 11 a.m., he finally shows up, saunters up like nothing's wrong. She leaps out of the car, and they go at it. And that was a real turning point for them, for George Miller, for the studio. And it's kind of fascinating to hear everyone's perspectives on it, not just their own perspectives, but other people who were on that set all day.
Kyle, what is the most rewarding thing for you in writing Blood, Sweat, and Chrome?
It's twofold, The rewarding thing for me first was just to be able to get all these people that I'm so interested in for a movie that I'm obsessed with and ask them anything I wanted. It sounds like a dream job. But now the rewarding thing is it making itself out, making the book's way out into the world, and hearing what everybody else has to say about it, I think other people who are just as obsessed with Fury Road are loving it, but I'm also really heartened by people who maybe are just more casual fans or some people who haven't even seen it. And they're still fascinated by it because it's a juicy story of how a movie gets made. There really aren't stories in Hollywood as wild as this one when it comes to the making of a movie. It was difficult, it was crazy, it was unprecedented, and somehow, despite all those odds, it still turned out to be a masterpiece.
And that's what makes one of the things about the book so riveting, and it makes you go back and reread it, and it makes you go back and rewatch the film again with just a different set of eyes, right? It's just incredible.
I hope so. Yeah, thank you.
Now, what's the next thing for you? What's next from Kyle?
Next from Kyle is a vacation. This is not an easy book to pull together. It was interviewing a whole lot of people. I wish I could have just flown to Australia and rifled through all their records and boxes. But, it was done during the pandemic, and it was a lot of late night phone calls and Zooms and, all done while I still have a very full-time job at the New York Times. I'm heartened that I was able to do it. Crazy that I emerged having written a book during this whole long, arduous process. But, I wouldn't mind just taking a little while off to decompress before I try to figure out my next move. Kind of though, I would liken it to, what a lot of women feel about being pregnant. It's so hard, so arduous, and enough time passes, you forget all that and want to do it again.
Yes, I can imagine. And well-deserved. So best of luck with your book, with your riveting account of the making of Mad Max Fury Road, Blood, Sweat, and Chrome. Thank you so much for your time today, Kyle.
Thanks for having me.
Best of luck to you. Again, thank you so much. The book is amazing, and good luck with the rest of your day. Can't wait to read more from you.
Appreciate it.
So even though I'm flying solo today without my normal co-host, Denisha Boston Hill, I'm going to end with DB's philosophy, as we always do. Where we must go, we who wander this wasteland in search of our better selves, ? The first history man. A quote from Mad Max Fury Road that ends the film. You can look now for Blood, Sweat, and Chrome out in bookstores and online.
We'd like to thank our guest, Kyle Buchanan, author of Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, The Making of Mad Max Fury Road. We want to thank you for being with us. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Denisha Boston Hill, your co-host and producers. This is an NCC Foundation production. Visit nccradio.org for more information. We're available on Odyssey, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and as a podcast on iTunes, Android Podcast, and Spreaker. This has been Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the Nassau Community College Foundation on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.